Hi, my name is Krystle Sarkodie. I'm 36 years old and I have fibroids. Many people don't know what fibroids are. They're basically growths within the womb in the pelvic area. There's 3 different types. Fortunately or unfortunately for me, I have all 3 types. So they cause a lot of heavy bleeding in terms of period. Sometimes they can get cysts and they rupture, which can be very, very painful. And I'm basically here just to tell my story and hopefully just raise a bit more awareness about fibroids, because I find it is affecting a lot more women of colour in my age group and younger. So I think it's important for people to hear my story and hopefully they may recognise some symptoms and can go to their GP or gynecologist and have it sorted out. So I first found out I had fibroids when I was about 21 years old. I experienced a miscarriage, and during the scan, the doctor just wanted to check everything was okay, that my uterus was clear. And in the process of checking the uterus, they saw that there were small golf-sized lumps in my uterus. So at the time they said, "Oh, do you know you have fibroids?" I had no idea what fibroids were. I didn't even know how to spell it. I was just like, "Are you talking about thyroids, which is in your throat?" And he was like, "No, fibroids." I was like, "Don't know what that is, never heard of it." He was like, "Okay, here's a little booklet, go and read up on it. You've got about 2 or 3, nothing major, something that happens to women of colour. So you might grow out of it, they may shrink, etc." I was like, okay, fine. I kind of left it at that. I didn't read the little leaflet he gave me. I kind of just put it in my room and thought, well, it's nothing that's affecting my health right now. I'm still able-bodied, I'm able to go out clubbing, I can still drink, I can still do everything, so I'm not really that bothered about it. Roll the clock down about 4 years later, I was having really, really, really bad cramps. And I was thinking, why am I having such bad cramps? My period was very, very heavy and I wasn't understanding what was going on. So I went to the doctors. They just put it down to an irregular flow, and it would change over the next few months. And they gave me some contraceptive medicines to go on to try and ease it. But the thing is, they didn't actually help. The problem seemed to get worse. And then I think it was in the Christmas of 2015, I was in severe pain and my mum took me to a hospital because I literally was in tears on the floor. When we went to the hospital, they did their general checks and they were like, "We can't see a problem." So my mum was like, "No, but she's in severe pain. There's something wrong." They said, "We can't see a problem. Maybe she's constipated." So they gave me medicine for constipation. And I went home, but I was still in severe pain, couldn't sleep, was literally on the floor in tears. My mum said, "No, we need to find out what's going on." So they took me back to hospital again. Another doctor checked. We can't see what the problem is. It could be appendicitis, but we can't see anything happening to the appendix. Sent me home. We went back home, and then I think we had a service. We were having a crossover service for church. I went to the service because I was in the choir, wanted to make sure I was there, but I was in so much pain, I couldn't sit in the congregation, so I was told to sit in another part of the auditorium. And I remember somebody coming up to me and saying, "You don't look well, are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm in a lot of pain, but I'll be fine." So the service went, we crossed over into 2016, and then I got in my car and I decided to drive home. Worst decision ever. I literally was in so much pain, I stopped in the middle of the road. I actually couldn't physically drive my car, and I kind of diverted into a side road. And a passerby came over and was like, "Are you okay?" And I was literally in tears, crying because I was in so much pain. So he was like, "Oh, who are you with? Where are your friends?" And he took my phone and took the last person who I dialed, which were people from church. They drove down, took me in their car to the hospital, called my mum and dad, who then came to the hospital as well. Took them ages because obviously we've gone into a new year, so the roads were completely manic, so they were struggling to get there. So I was there in pain. They had to put me on gas and air because I was literally screaming in the ward, and people were thinking, "What is going on? Why is this girl screaming?" I was literally screaming in pain. So the doctor did some more tests and he was like, "Do you have fibroids?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is. I don't think I do. I don't know. I just know I'm in pain." And he's like, "I think you may have had a cyst on one of your fibroids and it's ruptured." So I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So he was like, okay, we're going to do an MRI scan. So they did a scan, and it turned out I had a cyst on one of my fibroids, and the cyst had ruptured. But in the process of the cyst rupturing, it causes immense pain, like excruciating pain. So the pain I was experiencing was the actual cyst just basically exploding inside of my uterus. So after that, fine, we moved past that. I went to the doctor. They kind of started to follow up, said, okay, we need to keep you coming in just to make sure everything's okay. So I went in a couple of times. They were like, okay, everything seems okay. Then one of the gynecologists was like, you know what, I want to do a scan and I want to measure your fibroids because I can see you've had some scans quite a long time ago, but I want to see what's going on. When they did the scan, they found about 7 fibroids. So the 2 or 3 had now developed into multiple fibroids, and they were now dotted all over the uterus. So there were some in the lining of the womb, there was some around the neck of like my pelvic area, and then there was one that was kind of, how do I explain it? It was like within the lining of my womb, but it was protruding out. So with the fibroids, you have some that protrude from the actual kind of uterus. If you kind of do an upside down U, you have some that are at the bottom, have some that kind of just sit within the fleshy parts of the womb and don't do much, but then you have ones that can become intrusive. So this one was kind of poking out, but they weren't very concerned about it. So she was like, you know, we're just going to keep on monitoring it, you know, what's your diet, etc. So I said, okay, fine, I'll keep on watching my diet. Fast forward another couple of years, I'm starting to get really bad cramps again. I'm in severe pain. My periods are just off the Richter scale. I'm literally calling into work saying, I can't come into work today. It's my time in the month and I can't move. Like, I'm in so much pain, I can't move. So obviously for the employers, they think, oh, it's just the time of the month, you're just being dramatic. But for me, I was in a lot of pain and I just was like, what is going on? So I made an appointment with my GP and I was like, look, the period pains it's now getting off the Richter scale. I'm not too sure why it's so painful. I don't know what you can do to alleviate my pain, but something needs to be done because I'm actually starting to struggle with it. I'm struggling at work. It's affecting my job. I could lose my job because I'm always, every month, I'm taking time off because of my time of the month and the pains. So the doctor said, okay, we're going to send you back to the gynecologist. We're going to send you to the gynae ward. You're going to have some scans. So when I went to the gynae ward, they looked, they measured the fibroids, but they noticed that the fibroids had started to get bigger. So the sizes were now starting to increase. So whereas I believe that at that time, the last scan had been like 2 years and they were like 2 centimeters and 3 centimeters. We now had loads of them that were about 3 to 4 centimeters. And then we had one that was, I think it was like 5 to 6 centimeters. So they were getting bigger. So she realized that actually we need to start monitoring it more. So they will continue to monitor it. They advised me to go on contraceptives again, but I didn't like that because I have other side effects of contraceptives. For me, they don't help my fibroids. They don't really help with the pain. Okay, fine, it can be good for a month or 2, but then I'm back into the cycle of extreme pain and heavy bleeding again. So I opted not to go on any form of contraceptive at all. I just wanted them to find another way to deal with the fibroids. Then I think it was in 2 years ago now, actually, in 2020, I think, yeah, it was in the lockdown. I woke up one morning with really bad pains and I was like, this is like that pain from New Year. So I was in pain. I just thought, okay, I can handle it. I got up out of my bed to go to the loo, came back in the bed, and the pain just completely overwhelmed me. And I called 999 and they were like, what's the problem? I was like, I'm in so much pain. I can't breathe. Like, I feel like my stomach's gonna rip open. And they were like, oh, is there anyone around you? At the time, there were other people in the house, but I don't like to disturb people. I don't like to trouble anyone. I kind of like to just deal with things myself. So I didn't want to trouble anybody. So I think someone came to knock on the door to ask for me for something. And as they knocked, I wouldn't answer. Then they opened the door and came in and just saw me crying. They were like, oh, what's going on? Why are you crying? What's wrong? And I was just like, I'm in so much pain. I need an ambulance. So they were like, okay, get out of bed. But I couldn't get out of the bed because I was in so much pain that I was literally huddled on a board to try and stop the pain. So they literally had to carry me out of my room into the car, into the hospital. So when I got into the hospital, they were quite alarmed at how much pain I was in because they weren't sure maybe it's appendicitis and it's ruptured. We don't want the toxins to now spread in her body and like something else happens. So they immediately rushed me into a ward. And then they put me on a morphine drip in order to control the pain. I was back and forth. Doctors were in and out. I did an MRI. I did all types of different scans. And then eventually they were like, okay, one of your fibroids is basically degenerating. Now, degenerating is where a fibroid begins to decrease in size. So it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing because it's very, very painful. So one of the fibroids basically was shrinking because they said it got to the point where it couldn't get any more supply from my uterus. There was no more blood to get. There was no more space for it to grow. So it had to go down in size. And in that process, I was in extreme pain. So I was kept in hospital for 3 days. It took 3 days for the pain to stop. So I was literally on morphine, which is terribly strong. Like it makes you feel like you're in another world. So I was taking that, taking paracetamol, I was given codeine. So I was literally on a cocktail of drugs just to manage the pain. So I was in the hospital for 3 days, eventually went back home, told to rest, etc., while my body kind of recalibrated again. But then after that, the doctors began to become concerned about the fibroids, because obviously this was now the second episode of me being in hospital with the pain. So I then had to see the gynecologist, and what they found was one of the fibroids actually was now at the size of about a 4-month pregnancy. So it was literally taking up the front area of my womb. So literally what would look like someone's pregnant was actually my fibroid. So it was beginning to press on my bladder. It's beginning to push out in my stomach. So she said, this area you're seeing is not, it looks like it's fat, but it's actually your fibroid it's literally pushing in your womb and it's taking up space. So we need it to shrink, because if it doesn't shrink, if you do want to have children, it can cause complications, because fibroids tend to grow as a child grows, because it's taking in it's really weird. It's just strange. It like takes in the same, so as the child is growing, the fibroid can actually grow at the same rate, and you actually can give birth to a child and a fibroid. The gynecologist told me about a story and I was very shocked, but apparently it happened. So they then decided they wanted to put me on another form of medication in order to see if we could shrink the fibroid. So for the last 6 months, we're now in May. So about October of last year, 2021, I was put on a medication which basically brings on false menopause. So what happens is it completely stops your periods and everything else in terms of your reproductive system. So the body thinks you've gone into menopause, and then what will happen is that the actual fibroids no longer have a blood circulation. There's no more blood supply. There's nothing to feed them. So the idea is that because it stops, the fibroids then shrink. Unfortunately, in my case, the fibroids didn't shrink. They remained because they're very strong. So now we're looking at other options in terms of what happened. But because I'm quite young, they don't really want to operate, because obviously the womb is a very sensitive area. So there are many risks in deciding to try and remove fibroids that are sitting within the womb, like that are kind of obstructing, because you can actually affect the womb itself, because it's not just kind of sitting there, it's actually in the lining of my womb. So it means you would cut into the womb in order to remove it and then have to seal up. So I've been on that medication. I'm no longer on the medication anymore, which is good, because you can only take 2 rounds of it. Otherwise, your body goes into permanent menopause, meaning that you've basically triggered it before it's time. So you can only have 2 rounds of that. So I've only had the 2 rounds, but now I'm going through other methods of trying to get rid of the fibroids. So at the moment, the gynecologist is looking at if we can maybe burn it. There's a procedure where they can actually use a special type of camera to see the fibroid, and actually use a type of laser to basically shave the fibroid. But the problem with that is it takes a long time, and the size of the fibroid I have, it would mean I would have to go in a lot of times, and they don't want to do that. So we're looking at other ways that we could possibly deal with it. The end result, if I really wanted to get rid of all 7, is to have a hysterectomy and just take out my womb. But obviously that means I can't have children. So that is a very, very, very extreme choice to make. But I'm speaking with the gynecologist and we're seeing how best to treat it. But I have noticed that doing a lot more exercise is helping me in terms of managing the weight, because when I went onto the menopause medication, I put on a lot of weight very quickly. I think I must have put on at least 2 stone. And because it's menopause, you actually take the symptoms of menopause. So you have the mood swings, you have the hot flashes, you literally get all the symptoms. So I'm 36 with menopause like symptoms. It's not a great combination, because you can literally be happy one minute, next minute you're like, life is terrible, I hate everything. It's a very, very, it's just a very hard process to go through, but I knew I had to go through it. So I'm still going through my process, and I'm hoping I'll get things done. But I think it's important that I share my story, because I'm meeting more and more young women who are telling me, I've got fibroids, or I've been to the doctor and they say I've got this thing, and I'm having really heavy periods, or I'm in a lot of pain when my period comes. My painkillers aren't working. And I keep on telling people, go and see your GP. Don't try and self-medicate and just take painkillers. If you're taking painkillers and they're not working, or if the pain is so excessive you can't move, it's not just a normal cramp. You need to see a GP. You need to be tested, because you could have fibroids. You could even have endometriosis. I think I said it right. And that's like another end of fibroids. It can really affect you even in your mental well-being, because nobody understands what you're going through, because it's internal. So it's important for you to speak to the medical professionals who can help you, rather than a friend who may not understand. Because when I used to explain to people about my period pains or my time in the month, people just thought I was exaggerating, and people would think, oh, mine's not really that painful. But it was because of the fibroids that made the condition, it exacerbated the condition. If I didn't have fibroids, I probably wouldn't have had really heavy periods, and I probably wouldn't have had so much pain. But because of the fibroid, it just made the experience 10 times worse for me. So I really just want to share with everyone today and say, if you're somebody who is having extremely painful periods, as in you can't move, you can't walk, or your bleeding is really, really heavy, like you're changing pads multiple times, or you just feel like something isn't right inside, like something isn't sitting, you're having like 2 or 3 periods a month, go and see a GP. These things are not normal. It's not a normal cycle. I wish that when I was told in 2016 I had fibroids, I wish I had done more research to understand what it was and understand how I could combat it in order for them not to grow. But unfortunately, it took a long period of time, and now I'm at the stage where I'm looking at very extreme ways to deal with my fibroids, because it's gone on for so long and I haven't really managed it very well. So now we're at the point where I'm going on menopause drugs. You know, you don't really want to be 36 and going through menopause. It's not normal, it's not natural if your body hasn't actually done it by itself. So I really, really want to implore all the women out there, especially women of colour, because it affects us the most. If you're having any of those symptoms, or if you feel that you possibly could be in that category, just call your GP up or speak to a nurse, or go online and find out if you can go to a walk-in clinic and just have yourself checked over. Our health is very important. The women's body is a very hostile place at times, so things can happen to you that you don't expect. So that's what I would love to share with you this evening. Thank you for listening to my story, and I really do hope it helps someone. Thanks.